Hi, Representative Landry. Thank you so much for being with us today. As you know, April 22nd, 2020 is the 50th Earth Day anniversary, and we just wanted to get your views on some of the environmental issues that are facing Louisiana today and share that with people.
Yeah, I'm
So
happy to be here.
our first question is, what do you think the biggest environmental problem or issue facing Southeast Louisiana is in the next 50 years, and what should we do to solve it?
Definitely our coastal issues, which are enormous. Um, Flooding and land loss and hurricanes and hurricane preparation. I mean, it's such a complex issue. And what makes it even more complicated is, there's so many different governments and organizations. You have your parishes, your cities, you have the state, you have, other states, because I mean, water was everywhere. Um, it's complicated, and I think we're already like a little behind or very behind on it. And I'm really worried now that because of what's going on with the economy, because of COVID, um, that it'll won't get the attention or money it deserves. Which of course we do have to worry right now about the actual physical health of our people, but we want to make sure that there is South Louisiana here in 50 years, and we need to start today, yesterday.
So obviously you mentioned our current situation, which is why we're doing a virtual interview right now. So across the country, the COVID-19 pandemic poses a severe threat to people whose lungs, immune systems, and hearts have been compromised by environmental contaminants. So specifically in Louisiana, Cancer Alley exposure to environmental contaminants is most acute in communities that are primarily African American. So what can be done moving forward to make sure that vulnerable and marginalized populations live in communities that have safe water and clean air across Louisiana?
Well, it's a couple questions: water versus air. So water, something I think that we should look into as a state, and this could be a good infrastructure project, is statewide to, sorry, it's one of my dogs, statewide to have a large scale plan to replace or improve, oh, sorry y'all, the drinking water systems in the state. I mean, New Orleans is an old city, so all of our plumbing is old, but there are a lot of parts of the state that they just don't really have the funds to improve their water infrastructure. And that's something that I think could be a lot of jobs for people, but also ensure that everyone in the state has a safe drinking water system. For air, I think we need to much more heavily regulate a lot of these factories, and that's difficult to do in our state. You know, you've always had economic problems, and there's just not a lot of there's not the same industry here as other places, and so you end up getting a lot of regulations that are designed to help people waived. And I hope that now that we've seen from the COVID issue that, and we already knew this about Cancer Alley, but people who live in those places and in other communities are even more affected by COVID because it is a respiratory issue. And I hope that that helps to shed more light on how we're regulating some of these industries.
Thank you so much. So you previously mentioned that our number one environmental issue right now is the coastline of Louisiana. And this is something that you talked about during the campaign with the Coastal Master Plan, which does enjoy widespread bipartisan support across multiple levels of government. Much of the funding comes from oil revenues that have failed substantially during this epidemic. How can we make up the difference while keeping such broad support?
These are very big questions. I mean, the larger issues are what are we going to do as a state now that the price of oil is negative and tourism is so deeply affected? I think we need to really make sure we make good use of any federal dollars that we get, and instead of just maybe giving them directly to individuals, which we need to do right now, right? But maybe several months down the road or next year, put a lot of those dollars into, like I said, like infrastructure spending, whether it's replacing the pipes, whether it's even more massive coastal restoration programs, but really looking at what can we do with the only pot of money that's available, really federal money, to create jobs, but also create jobs that will help us sustain our community for as long as possible. And it's hard because there's only going to be a limited amount of money, and everyone's in need, right? But to have some hard conversations about what our priorities are, it's going to be a tough year.
In terms of our priorities as a government and as a legislature, the global climate crisis is gaining a lot of momentum based on recent events that have been happening. And we are hoping that preventative action will start to be taken in Louisiana legislature specifically. So how will the local government make changes around our communities that will help not only convince people that the climate crisis is real, but also convince them that action is necessary?
How will our local communities?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, that kind of goes back to what we just said about, making sure individuals at a local level have safe drinking water and safe air. And I think being able to use some of the data from this crisis to show how different areas are being affected. And not just that the individuals are being affected, but, whole communities and industries are affected when they don't have people to live there or people to work there. It's tough right now because around the state, there are certain areas that haven't been as hard hit by COVID, and they don't really see the same concern as us. But that's the same as, drinking water and air quality. There are wealthier communities that aren't as concerned, maybe because someone who's living in Shreveport doesn't really understand coastal issues like we do. And I think that's something we really need to work on bridging, is to explain to them and show them, like, look, like what affects us down here affects you up there, maybe not today, but it eventually will.
And do you know of any specific programs or initiatives that are focused on educating people who are not on the front lines of this crisis? Anything that you would like to shout out?
I don't know of anything newer since this has happened. I mean, there's just a lot of turmoil, a lot of chaos about discussing like what we're going to do next. There's still so many people are afraid, and they think that we're just going to go back to like we were, a month ago. And that's just not going to happen. It's not going to happen for the state, and it's not going to happen for individuals. And it's going to take a while for that to sink in. I hope that the state doesn't rush to create any new plans or proposals, because I think we don't know yet exactly how this is going to play out. But in direct answer to your question, I don't know of any new programs that have come about in the last month.
And so another question is that the idea of having a home and a house has become very important during this pandemic, because it's really the only place that people are feeling safe. Mm-hmm. So what are we doing as a state to protect people's homes from environmental issues like catastrophic flooding that we've seen an uptick in recent years?
We're not doing enough. I mean, we see in New Orleans that when we get heavy rains, our systems can't keep up with it. The Mississippi River gets higher and higher every year. It's one of those things that unfortunately people don't pay attention to until it's too late. We also have a problem in, certain low-lying areas that some of those areas just, we're not going to ever be able to fix them, Delcroix and some of those islands. And instead of just sort of leaving them for dead and ignoring them, it would be my hope that we could use them as examples and say, look, like we didn't get to these people in time. Let's not have it happen to everyone else, which is super unfortunate. I wish we could save all of them. But in places, especially like New Orleans, that are high density, like we have got to get the flooding issues under control, because hurricane season is coming very soon. And it just, makes us all nervous that every time it rains, we might have flooding. And I don't know what the answer to that is right now, but it's only going to get worse. And so you're right, we need to really focus on that.
And so flooding especially has been an issue that young people a lot are starting to take notice of. And many Louisiana high school seniors are going to be eligible to vote in this July in the election. So what would you say to them, although you're not on the ballot in July or November, what would you say to them? And is there anything that you want them to know about their political efficacy?
You mean in terms of going out to vote, or who to vote for, or what do you
Going
mean?
out to vote, how to vote. Is there anything that you're working on right now if our election won't happen in July?
Yes, I'm glad you asked that. So for everyone watching, our presidential primary, along with a few other races, was supposed to happen in April, and it got pushed back to July because of COVID. And right now, and actually there's going to be another hearing tomorrow I may go to, the state is working on an emergency plan. And part of that emergency plan would expand early voting from 1 week to 2 weeks, which is great. A lot of people like myself, I always early vote. I go at lunchtime from work. The lines are shorter. You can just kind of do it in your own time. But one thing that they're proposing that we hope to pass is expanded vote by mail. So right now in Louisiana, we don't have a lot of people who vote by mail because the rules are pretty strict. You have to be over 65 or a college student, away from home, in the military, and there's a few other disabled, a few other exceptions. And so the current proposal for the summer would expand it very generally to people who have been physically affected by COVID or exposed to COVID or take care of a family member exposed to it. But related to that, I already had a bill before all this happened that would expand the option to vote by mail to any voter. And that's actually fairly common in the country. Over 30 states allow any voter who wants to vote by mail, and there's actually 5 or 6 states that have almost exclusive vote by mail. So it's something that has become pretty common, but in a state like ours that is very conservative, a lot of people don't understand it, or don't like it, or for partisan reasons aren't really on board with it. And we're hoping, now that we've seen this crisis, right, that there's so many people who are afraid to go out in public, that this will help people opposing vote by mail understand that our new reality is very uncertain, and people shouldn't have to choose between their health or their right to vote. So there's a movement out there. You can go to Vote by Mail Louisiana, or look at my Instagram, or there's a whole bunch of Instagrams that would allow y'all to call your legislators or email them. And I would say it's very important to include a personal reason, such as my mom, for example, has an autoimmune issue, and I'm going to be careful in crowds for a long time because I see her and I don't want to give it to her. I might be healthy, but I don't want to give it to her. So I would encourage y'all to get involved with that. There's a great group of college students right now who are working on it, and then there's some other organizations working on it. And we don't know exactly what's going to happen yet, but I think it's looking more positive. I'm optimistic.
And do you think that an increase in the ability to vote by mail will have an impact on the way that Louisiana voters vote, or the way that issues, the results of elections?
Yeah, I think you'll see. I think you'll see greater participation in voting. We have a lower voter turnout rate than most states. I don't think we're the lowest, but it's not great. And I think allowing people to request a ballot by mail would increase turnout, but also I think it would help people to make more informed decisions, because they would have their ballot, at home on their kitchen table, and they could actually look up the candidates, look up what's going on. And I mean, it's kind of hard to do that in a voting booth when you have people in line behind you and you just have your phone and maybe you forgot to do it before. But if you have your ballot, you can actually spend some time looking at what's on it and seeing how you want to vote. I think it would be a positive.
All right. Thank you so much. Is there anything else that you would like to share with the people before we say goodbye?
I think just, keep on doing what y'all are doing, like what you're working on. There are so many issues that could use some attention right now. And since we're all home, the use of social media and email and texting has become so important. And I think that's where, younger generation, I guess myself and younger, has an edge, that we know how to use all these things and we know how to communicate by them. I mean, someone interviewed me on something today because they saw something I tweeted yesterday. And I don't even like Twitter that much. It's just a lot of mean people on there, but I know how to use it. And I do use it every day. And I think just the ability to feel comfortable with social media and with electronic media is a huge, huge plus for younger people. And I think you should take it and run with it.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us today, Representative Landry. We really, really appreciate you taking the time to answer some questions and talk to people. And we really hope that you and your family are staying safe during this time.
I hope y'all are too. And if you want to reach out anytime, like I said, I do all my own social media. You can always message me or send an email. Katie has all my information. But yeah, reach out anytime.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Bye.
you. Good luck. Bye-bye.